What does mental health have to do with bringing about a messianic time? If you look at different nations that have ruled the world in history, you'll see that they all have one thing in common. They did it with fear, not in a good way, like awe of God. In Hebrew, we say yirat Hashem, which means like this awe, like I know there's someone with a big O, bigger than all of us, and we are all pieces of that, and it lives through us, and when we're in alignment with it, we can do amazing things. Yira in the negative sense, which most people often misinterpret it as, is, oh, I'm so afraid that this big thing is gonna like attack me if I do the wrong thing. And I once heard one of my favorite rabbis in Israel, Benji Levine, who was on my podcast, say that God is much more mekel, more permissive than we allow it, him, her, they to be. I was reading today in Zera Shimshon about a gentleman who, Rabbi Seltzer, who put together these pieces of the Zera Shimshon. Zera Shimshon is like this big commentator on the entire Torah, and he takes pieces of it and talks about different people. He once had a congregant who would walk out every single time, Jewish congregation, would say Birkat Kohanim. What is that? So I happen to come from a long line of Kohanim. We're 12 tribes and we whittled it down to 3 because they were after us and we were dispersed all over the world. And so it became Kohanim, Israelites, and Levi. And every Shabbat, they do the priestly blessing. This guy, for some reason, would duck out and leave every single time they're about to do it. So one time he had him over for Shabbat and he said, why is it that you keep leaving the synagogue every time we do the priestly blessing? And he said, I've never told this story to anyone, so here's a story within a story. This man was in concentration camps, a young kid, and there was this one rabbi who decided to do Passover, and word got around that they were going to do Passover in the camps. Now, how do they do that? They're barely eating a piece of cornbread every day. The Nazis had figured out that the Jews should only eat one little size cornbread and 1 glass of water or coffee, and that was all they were allowed. Word got around that there was one man who was Jewish but was working as like an assistant, like a level up. Instead of being in the barracks bunks with the other Jews, he was allowed to work inside of the kitchen and in one of the Nazis' homes. Somehow this rabbi was able to get word to him that they needed just 2 pieces of matzah for Passover. He said, are you crazy? Like, I'm not gonna sneak into the kitchen and try to make matzah. That's ridiculous. And he said, listen, there are so many Jews here that are still somehow connected to God, and we have no reason to live anyway. But if you could just help us out with 2 slices of matzah, we could disseminate little pieces of it to hundreds of us, and then we could actually keep the mitzvah of Passover. So he says, okay, I'm risking my life. If they ever find out that I did this, I will be killed immediately. I guess I'm gonna try for you guys. Somehow he got all the right details of how to make kosher matzah inside of an oven. He had to kosher the oven. The merit that he accrued for doing this for hundreds of Jews in the Holocaust is like unbelievable. So he goes into this Nazi's kitchen, koshers the oven, makes 2 slices of matzah, which is very hard to do because you have to get it out of the oven within 18 minutes, and his life could have been endangered at any moment. He makes the little holes in it, and he somehow, on Erev Passover, is able to present with 2 pieces of matzah. And the rabbi was able to disseminate little pieces of it to hundreds and hundreds of Jews. In the book, it says 800, gives little pieces of matzah to 800 Jews. Somehow they have this Seder. It's the middle of the night, and lo and behold, a Nazi soldier finds them. And all of the Jews jump into their beds. Some of them run across campus, and they're shivering, and they were crying so hard at that moment that one of them gets pulled out of his bed, and the Nazi makes a scene and says, if you don't tell me why you all gathered, I'm definitely gonna kill you. But I will kill you less painfully if you tell me who started it and what you were all doing. The Jews said nothing. And they were all shivering, shaking, watching this happen. And finally, the rabbi, who was like 80-something years old, raises his hand and says, it was me. I wanted all these Jews to get the chance to eat matzah on Passover. And I'm sorry, but you can take my life, but don't take anyone else's. And the Nazi looks at him and rips him out of his bed and holds a gun to his head, and he says, surely, and this is the important part, you have to die for doing something so atrocious as pulling hundreds of people together to do such a disgusting thing. And the rabbi looks at him and he says, before I go, because I have nothing to leave these people, all of my money and my clothing and my family has been taken from me. But I want to ask you if you would please just let me say the priestly blessing, because I happen to be a Kohen. Can I give them all one blessing before I go? And the Nazi laughs really hard and he's like, it doesn't mean anything anyway, go ahead. And he gives the Yivarechecha, the whole blessing, and then he fortunately kills him in front of everybody. This guy who the rabbi was talking to said, until today, I can't listen to the priestly blessing because I was given that blessing by such a holy person, and it brings up way too many horrible memories for me. Now, why am I telling you this story? Number one, because I went to an event last night for mental health. And I was sitting there and I was thinking about how preposterous it is that once again, the Jewish people are being called upon to defend why we do these crazy, what did he call them? Destructive, ridiculous, dangerous things, such as trying to uphold the Torah, give the world laws from it, like don't murder, don't commit incest, don't rape, don't steal, disturb someone's sleep. Basic things that we all take for granted that our judicial system has implemented because there are rules in the Torah that every single religion has adopted because they just make sound sense. If you don't know much about Judaism, you might say all organized religions are X, Y, and Z. But I want to ask you to take a few minutes today to really contemplate, am I just saying that because other religions or little fringe numbers of people who are extremists take religion to such a degree that it actually goes against what the whole purpose is, and that is to bring light to the world. I was sitting there and listening to how much suffering is going on in Israel. Right now, there are about 500,000 people in Israel right now who have been affected by either they themselves were in a terror attack on October 7th, know someone who directly who died in front of them or near them. They heard the cries of it. People who have been in the army, taken hostage and brought back, or were amputated, know someone who was amputated or taken hostage but brought back. I mean, the list goes on and on of how much this has affected people in Israel. But then you have the greater amounts of Jews and Jewish allies from all over the world who have firsthand heard stories of these atrocious acts of violence. I am not a war person. I believe in life. I believe in human beings, that we all deep down are very good and want to choose good, even though some of us may have been indoctrinated to do bad or evil or hurt others. The story illustrates how little people know about what our job is as a Jewish people, but also it illustrates what's happening now on a broader level, which is that the same people who are trying to scream tolerance are missing the boat that there are things within the religious practice of the Jewish people that are saving the world from complete chaos and destruction. And you might sit there and say, that's not true. The Jewish people are so small. There's only 15 million of them, and only 30% of them keep Shabbat and study the Torah. It doesn't matter. Why do you keep screaming about the Torah? It doesn't matter, because deep down, Rabbi Manis Friedman said yesterday that everybody knows it. If you're part of the Jewish people, Christianity, or Islam, we can all agree Jewish people were standing on Mount Sinai. between 3,500 and 4,000 years ago. And we heard the call on Mount Sinai. All of us, we all had this prophecy. We all felt God's presence. We're given this Torah, lots of laws, sometimes really uncomfortable and very inconvenient truths that we have to hold. And it's in our DNA and we know it. And unfortunately, the same thing that people hate us for, because we're constantly reminding people, hey, there is a God and there's things that we have to do here, whether we like them or not. Those are the things that are actually going to save us from complete chaos, despair, and destruction. Now, here's the cool thing. There's still a lot of great work that can be done. You have two things you got to do. You got to take care of yourself. Make sure you're physically healthy. There's many, many pathways to truth, but if you have some sort of idea that there is a direct connection between you and God, start using that and start praying. And take care of your family and your community. You can be respectful that there is a truth that there could be a God and a messianic era that is upon us. It doesn't matter how we get there, but we all have to work together to try to bring that. And we're not going to do it by protecting people who want everyone to believe one way. That idea brings despair and depression. We just can't afford for you to be in despair. A quick workaround for all of this is to make every single person that you meet feel present, feel love, feel heard, to make space for the divine that lives within each of us at all times. Shabbat shalom.